I'm turning on the iClicker attendance in about 20 seconds, so please be sure to sign in. Okay, and the attendance should be on now. Okay. All right, I think just about everyone's here. Okay. All right, let's start. I'll try to start as close as I can to 9:01. Give everyone just maybe a minute to finish signing in. Okay, well, welcome back. We are now in class number 2, moving along as quickly as we can. I hope you're all taking good care of yourself and doing everything that we're supposed to be doing this time of year and keeping distance and all these other measures which are unusual but I think quite important. Okay, before we get started, are there any questions? Anything on anyone's mind? You can just raise your hand or put something in the chat. Okay. Most of you did this already, but if you didn't already, if you could rename yourself last name, comma first, that helps me run the recitation a lot easier. Just click rename on yourself. That'll make my life a little bit simpler. Okay, thank you. Okay. Let me begin then by recapping our last class. And by the way, I read all of your what I call these minute papers, the last minute of class. I asked you to write something quickly to share what was on your minds. I read all of them. I didn't read all of them super carefully, but I got the gist. And I want to clarify a few things from last class and help bridge to this class. So last week we discussed this concept of adverse possession, which we'll be spending today on as well. At its most basic level, adverse possession is a way to reward people who use land in a productive fashion and punish people who fail to assert their rights to a piece of land. So if you enter a piece of land and you do so openly, and you stay there for some continuous period of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and you have the right state of mind, what's called the claim of right, then the land becomes yours. In our first class on Monday, we talked about the first two elements, right? What does it mean to enter property, and what does it mean to have an open and notorious usage? We also talked about the fourth element, about what are the different states of mind, what are called claim of rights. Today's cases focus on the third element, which is continuous. Now, you may think, oh, Josh, isn't continuous easy? Isn't that the simplest one? We just count the years. I think as the cases here show, continuity is not so straightforward. And very often, the continuous element proves the most difficult, especially when multiple people live on the property, right? You have multiple people coming in and out over the course of time. Okay. All right, and please try to be here on time, because when you come in late, I have to physically admit you, and it's not something that I can do immediately because I'm trying to lecture and stuff. By the way, I got a new light ring that illuminates things. I think the lighting's a little bit better. I'm trying to figure out the best option. The image is better, but I get this awful glare on my glasses. But we're living in the world of Zoom. Okay, so let's try a question. And this is one I had from last class, but I didn't get to, so I'll try it over here. Okay, so if you look on your, by the way, I'm going to start it now. It's question number 1. There are 2 ways of accessing the questions with iClicker. There's an app on your phone, and you can do it in the browser, right? If you log in your browser with your same credentials. I think the browser version is more reliable. I think the app version's buggy. So if you can, during class, use the browser version, I think you'll have less problems. I had my other class people having their app freezing up, which I don't like. The second thing I want to mention is I don't want these questions to take forever. I'm going to try to limit how much time I give for each question. Maybe basically I'll read it and give you 30 seconds and you put an answer in. The reason why is, again, we are short on time. I only have an hour and 15 minutes, so these should be quick. So I won't say this again. So this is your first question, question 1. It says, O owns and has been in possession of a 100-acre farm since 1975. In 1994, A entered the back 40 acres under color of invalid deed from Z, who had no claim to the land, for the entire 100 acres. Since her entry, A has occupied and improved the back 40 in the usual manner for the period required by the statute of limitations. So here are options. A has acquired all 100 acres by adverse possession. B has acquired only the back 40 acres by adverse possession. A has not acquired any land, or none of the above. I always throw D in there just to mess with you. All right, I'll give you about 20 seconds because I spent a lot of time reading it. I see 30 answers. Okay, I'll stop the poll at the 1:55 mark, so you know where you're. Make sure you put an answer in, please. Okay, 10 seconds more. Just about everyone. Okay, this is good. This is about how quickly I need to get them done. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop it there. All right. Let's see the results. All right. So, do you guys see the results, by the way? Just give me thumbs up. No? How do I send the results to you? Okay, I know how to do it. I'll do it in a second. Okay, so I'll just read them to you. 34% of you put A, 56% of you put B, and 10% put C. Okay, so let's start calling on people. Whoever was last in the last class, just raise your hand. I'll call on you, and then I'll move down the roster. So who was last?
I was up next.
I appreciate your honesty, Alan. Thank you, sir. What did you put here?
I put B.
Okay, tell me why'd you put B?
I put B because A only entered onto the back 40 acres.
Good.
And he improved the back 40 acres so it's open and notorious.
Good.
And based on the fact pattern, he met the statutory requirements.
Okay, that's good, Alan. Let me ask you a follow-up question if I can interrupt you for a second. Does it matter that the deed, right, was for the entire 100 acres? Does that matter?
No, because it was an invalid deed.
Very good, very good. What's the only thing that matters for purposes of adverse possession? Does the deed matter?
No, it's the physical entry.
Yes. Perfect. Yeah, 100%. Good. The answer here is B. Very good. Thank you, Alan. I want everyone to understand, though, why that's the case. Alan said exactly correct. In this class, there's going to be a lot of fraud. I'm sorry, there will be. Invariably, people are going to cheat someone else. Okay? That's just going to happen in this class. So it doesn't really matter what the what do you call it? The deed says. What's going to matter is where the person actually enters and where the person actually uses the land. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. All right, I'm going to skip question 2. You can look at it on your own time. It's actually one of the questions from the book. If you want to go over it later, I'd be happy to talk to you at the office hours. I'm going to skip it for now. I want to remind everyone that we have this class notes folder. This link, which I'll put into our chat, you should just open up every day, and every day there'll be a new document, this one called Class 2. I encourage you to open it up. This will have the questions I'm asking. It will have different graphics and pictures. It will have different things you need to know. Also, I'll give you one more reminder. I'm writing these case summaries for this book I'm writing. And every class I'll add to. So I've added in that folder a case summary for Howard v. Kunto and a case summary for O'Keefe v. Snyder. These will be available the morning of class, so you can skim them over. but I don't want them to be a substitute for the reading. Okay. Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
This question that you just gave us, I'm curious about because I don't know where you determine the separation of this property. For example, this was all I thought, is this all one tract of land,
Yep.
all 100 acres, or is it each acre is its own? And if each acre is its own, then it it seems like if you're going by the reasoning that we just discussed, then if someone only occupies half of the acre, they don't have the acre, which doesn't line up with what we said last week.
Oh,
So,
it does. When you're dealing with adverse possession, the um, the boundaries of the deed are not very important. What matters is the part that you use. So if you see where it says in 1994, A entered the back 40 acres, she only entered the back 40 acres. The question says nothing whether she entered the other 60. So you have to read the question very carefully. Now, I think what you're asking about is, do you need to use every single inch of those 40 acres? No, no, no. But in this question, they signify that there's a 40 acres and a 60 acres. And only 40 was used and only 40 was entered. I think that's the key point to keep in mind.
okay, so it's like if the lady with the stairs to her house had won those 15
Inches,
she
right?
would have won those 15 inches, but not the whole hole.
Exactly. Yeah, perfect, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Thanks, Nancy, right? So if your staircase goes over by 15 inches, you don't acquire the entire house. You just acquire the part that you use. I think that's the way of looking at it. Does that make sense? I appreciate your backdrop. Okay. Mackenzie, you have a question?
I had chose A because right above this question it talks about constructive possession, where if you have color of title for the whole part, then you kind of benefit because the activities that you do on a certain part of that land apply to the whole part described in that deed. I didn't think that just because it was fraudulent deed that
The deed doesn't matter. The key point here is entry. It says she only entered the back 40 acres. If you've never taken a step onto the front 60, you can't possibly claim adverse possession. There's no entry,
okay.
right? No, I see what you're thinking. I think you guys are thinking in the right track. But you have to look at the question carefully, and it says entry. And she's only improved and occupied the back 40. It says nothing about the front 60.
Okay.
Okay? Clay, you have a question in the chat. I'd prefer if you just read it loud. I don't like reading people's chat questions.
Well, so I was asking that how long was A on the land? Because in the question, I guess we just assume that it's 2020 because it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got C because I didn't know what time period had elapsed since she entered the back 40 because the statute hasn't run, she doesn't have that.
Okay, fair point, I suppose. I think you can generally presume it's the current year unless they tell you otherwise. What's that backdrop? What city is that?
Or it's not.
Oh, Star Wars. Okay, never mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I see where you are today. All right, very good. Thanks, Clay. Any other questions on that first one? Okay. All right, let's move on. And I want to discuss a concept known as tacking. Tacking. Okay, what is tacking? Tacking, the word means when you add things together, right? If you tack together with a thumbtack, right, you're connecting things. Tacking is a way that multiple people can come together and combine their time in order to satisfy a statute of limitations. Again, tacking is a way for multiple people to come together and combine their time as a way to satisfy the statute of limitations. The easiest example of tacking is like this. Let's say a state has a 10-year statute of limitations for adverse possession. Person A is there for 5 years. He's using it openly, notoriously. And after 5 years, he gets tired. He's like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. So he makes an agreement with person B and says, I tell you what, if you stick around here for another 5 years and you make it through the end, we'll share Blackacre. And the person says, sure, that's fine. So person A is there for 5 years. There's this agreement. Person B is there for 5 years. Collectively, they're there for 10. None of them had 10 years by themselves, but collectively they had it for 10. And this agreement between the two of them is very important. This agreement is known as privity. Privity. You probably studied the word privity in contracts, I suspect. Privity refers to a relationship or a connection or a bond between two or more parties. Okay? And virtually every state, I think every state in the Union has some form of tacking. Tacking becomes very important in adverse possession when you have a house that one person owns and lives in for a very long time, and then they transfer it to a second party, and it turns out, surprise, surprise, they don't own it. And then the current owner needs to rely on its predecessor's usage to meet the statute of limitations. Okay? All right, so let's try some more questions. Okay, let's try this one. Let's try a question. Again, I probably won't get to every question. I'll maybe jump around. But this one I'm calling question 4. It should be on your screens now. So let me read it to you. In 1994, A enters adversely upon Blackacre owned by O. In 1995, O dies, leaving a will that divides Blackacre to B for life, remainder to C. I promise there's no future interest here. This is not a thing. You can forget it from last semester. In 2010, B dies without ever having entered upon Blackacre, which means C's remainder comes into effect. Okay, who owns Blackacre? Okay. Another 10 seconds. We got about 50 of you in here. 5 seconds. All right. I'm going to stop it there. All right, so I think Alan, you were last, right? So who's next? So I'm still getting your alphabet. Is that Brianna? Brianna, you here? No Brianna. Okay. And next up is, oops. I'm sorry. Just give me a second. Still getting the hang of the sequencing. Okay, Brianna. Thomas? R? G? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Thomas. What did you put here?
I put A.
Okay, tell me why you put A.
So I put the statute of limitations would begin in 94,
Good.
and then expire 10 years later, or end 10 years later.
Okay, good. Does it matter that O died? Does it matter that B died? Does it matter that it went to C? Does any of that matter?
No, because they never tried to kick off A.
That's right. Very good. So the answer here, the answer to question number 4 is that A owns it. Okay, very good. So about 80% of you put A. A couple people put B. A few people put C. Okay, and some people put O. Well, it's not O because O's dead. So it's, O can't own. I mean, you can't own land in your afterlife. But I do want to address C because about 10% of you put C. I suspect what you were thinking is that when you have these multiple transfers upon death that it restarts the statute of limitations? The answer is no, it does not. The statute does not reset when it goes from O to B and B to C, right? A starts squatting against O, and that starts a 10-year clock. And it doesn't matter. Now you might ask, Josh, that's not fair. I just inherited this property, right? How am I supposed to know about these squatters? Well, that's actually your job. When you inherit property, right? You have an obligation to figure out what the deal is. Are there people squatting on it? If there are, you have to take steps to kick them off. Now, what if by the time C gets it, right, it's not his anymore? Because think about it. Let me come back to you, Thomas. In what year did A obtain Blackacre? He started squatting in 94, assume a 10-year...
2004.
2004. So by the time 2010 rolled around, was it even his to inherit?
No, he should have been checking up on it even before he owned it.
Yeah, very, very good point, Thomas. Thank you. Let's say you're a remainderman, if I can use that phrase from last semester, right? You have a remainder. You have something of an obligation to check up on your property. It's like, wait a minute, is there some guy squatting? You go to B, hey B, why aren't you kicking this guy off, right? It's yours. In fact, in some cases, C could actually go to court as the remainderman and seek an ejection of A. But the failure to do this, okay? And by the way, I see the question in the chat. Assume it's 10 years unless I say otherwise. That, I think in the book it's generally a 10-year limitation period, so just assume 10 years. Okay. All right. Questions on that question?
Professor, I have a question.
I can't see who's speaking now?
Anthony?
Anthony, go ahead, yeah. Just let me call on you first. Okay, see Anthony's first in the queue. Go ahead.
So if O finds the squatter on his land, and
Okay.
decides not to make a claim,
Right.
doesn't kick him out, after 10 years, say A is the squatter, he could make a claim for adverse possession and kick O out.
Well, he doesn't have to kick O out. O isn't there, right? In other words, the only way A acquires
If O
at
didn't die,
what?
my bad. If O didn't die, so both of them are still alive,
Okay.
A enters adversely, O sees him, he decides, whatever, I'm just gonna let it be. After 10 years, can A then make a claim for adverse possession and kick O out?
Yeah, exactly. Although, I mean, adverse possession only works if A is there by himself. If A is there with O, it doesn't really work because that's not exclusive, right? He's basically with someone else.
Okay.
Right. In other words, for A to adversely possess Blackacre, he has to be there alone. O can't be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Chance, go ahead.
Do we ever need to have actual facts that allege that A tried to adversely possess?
I'm sorry. Say it again.
In this question, there's no proof that A tried to adversely possess Blackacre. He was just there. Do we need?
It
some
says.
type of-
I think the question says in 1994, A adversely enters upon Blackacre. I think that's.
Oh crap! Sorry, my bad. I apologize.
And your shirt's in bad taste again. It's okay. We had one. If you weren't here, and last we had another. Oh yeah, that's right. You had a Corona shirt last year. Okay, it's okay. All right. I wear the same thing every day. You can't even tell where I am. All right. Any other questions on that one? But tacking. We'll do 2 cases on tacking this semester. Today in class. Okay. Let me go into another topic. We talked about tacking. Now I want to talk about the concept of disability. When I say disability, people think of like a physical handicap. Like a person's in a wheelchair, or they have a hearing impairment or a visual impairment, whatever it happens to be. But the phrase disability has, I think, a different context in property law, right? In the context of property law, a disability refers to something that pauses the statute of limitations, right? I think of the statute of limitations as a clock. It goes tick, 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 right? And once that clock hits 10 years, you're done, right? You won the game, right? You've obtained adverse possession. Um, but a disability prevents the clock from starting, right? With a disability, the clock never starts. Okay, let me say that again. With a disability, the clock never starts. But here's a very common misconception. Students often think that a disability will pause a ticking clock. That's not correct. A disability cannot pause a ticking clock. A disability only stops the clock from ticking in the first place. This is something that students screw up in the exam every year. They say, oh, a disability arose, that means you pause the clock. No, no, no. Again, the disability only matters if it exists at entry, right? If the disability exists at entry, the clock never starts. And if the disability exists at entry, the clock never starts. But if the disability arises at some point after the entry, tick, 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 tick. It never stops ticking. All right, questions on that so far? All right. Every state has a different disability statute, right? All states have at least two, and Texas has these two. Okay, so what's a disability? Well, the first one you probably studied in contracts. If a person's under the age of 18, they lack capacity. You know this from contracts, right? If a person under 18 makes a contract, someone yelled at me last year, it's generally not enforceable. I said generally, because I know there are exceptions. Last year, you can't enforce a contract under 18. Someone said, yes, you can, Professor Black, Professor Ricks told me. So I'm like, okay, fine, you're right. Okay, but as a general matter, if you're under 18, the contract's not enforceable. Okay, I'm not a contract professor, I'll do my best. Okay? So what does that mean? Right? A person under the age of 18 lacks capacity. Now, that's a unique disability because eventually, God willing, everyone becomes 18. So let's say a person starts out at 17, the clock doesn't start. When the person turns 18, tick, 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 the clock begins. So let's say that I am squatting on land that's owned by a 17-year-old. The first year that I'm squatting on this minor's land does not count for the statute of limitation. But when he turns 18, tick, 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 the clock begins to tick. Make sense? All right. The second disability is of a different nature. In Texas, it's described as being an unsound mind. That sounds awful, doesn't it? An unsound mind. Not a very modern term. And I'll be frank, I'm not even sure what it means. It's a term that probably has a meaning that changes from time to time. But let's just say you're in a, I'll give you probably an easy example. Let's say you're in a coma, right? And you're not aware of what's going on. The clock will not start against you. And this one I think makes some sense, right? Let's say you know that, John Doe is in a coma. You say, I have an idea. Let me enter into Blackacre where John Doe lives and we stay there for 10 years. He'll never, he'll never kick me out. Well, guess what? Because John Doe's in a coma of unsound mind, he has no idea you're squatting. And that defeats the purpose of adverse possession. The clock never starts ticking, right? The clock never starts ticking because John is in a coma. All right? Everyone with me so far? And I see Nikki has a question in the chat. The disability concept goes to the element of continuity. I think it's the third element, right? So you just say you never got to year 0, right? You may have entered Blackacre, but for purpose of the statute of limitation, you have 0 years on Blackacre. All right. Dylan, I see your hand up and you raise your hand. Very good. Go ahead, Dylan.
Alright, can you figure out how to raise my hand?
That's okay. I think you did it two ways correctly.
So I guess I was under the wrong impression when you said about a disability and a minor. You said if you squatted on a minor's land, the clock
Yes.
would start ticking. I thought it was if a minor.
That's what everyone thinks. That's what everyone thinks, right?
Does it work both ways, or is it just if you try to take a person with a disability line?
You know, well, let me take the easier case. Generally, when someone's of an unsound mind, they're not squatting land, but I'll take the minor. I don't see any reason why a minor can't adversely possess property. I've not seen a case like that, but if you know, let's say you're 15 years old and you say, you know what, I'm going to squat this land, and you finish when you're 25, I'm not familiar with any case saying you can't do that. The disability applies, right? Right? The disability applies when you're squatting on the person. And let me just explain why this is. The entire point of adverse possession is that people know, right? That the person who owns the land knows someone's squatting. If the person who owns the land is a minor, how are they supposed to know, right? It's unfair to charge them with that knowledge. Or if the person who owns the land is in a coma, how can you possibly charge them with knowledge if they're in a coma? I actually think that was actually my exam question last year. I actually, now that I remember, I made it that the person squatting was a minor. And everyone said, oh, the person squatting is a minor, therefore he told the statute. No. The person squatting wants the clock to run, right? They don't want to stop the clock. The person squatting wants the clock to tick, tick, tick. It's the owner, right? Let me give you another example, Dylan, right? Let's say that you inherit property when you're 5 years old, right? You know what the hell's going on. You probably have a guardian appointed on your benefit. So one of the reasons why I have this rule is to say, okay, while the person's under a guardianship, we don't run the statute against them, right? The statute runs when they turn 18. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But it's a very common thing students ask. I think that was my exam question last year, which is why I'm stressing this point, because a bunch of people screwed it up. Let's do some questions. If you go on your phone, please, or your app, what I'm calling question number 5. And I promise we'll get to the two cases today. I'm going a little bit out of order because I think it makes more sense to do these things first and get them out of the way. All right, so this is question 5. It says, O is the owner in 1995, and A enters adversely in 1995. O is insane, and again, that might not be the best word for this, but here we are. That's the word in the book. O is insane in 1995. O dies insane in 2008. Okay, so your first question is, oh, I'm sorry, I selected the wrong one. This should be a numerical value. I apologize, just ignore that one. I'm sorry. It's different, I have to click a different button. So the first question is, O's heir H is under no disability in 2008. What year will the statute run? And I'd like you to enter the year. I apologize. I'll go back later and I'll give everyone credit for that one. That way you don't have an incomplete on your score. I'm sorry. Okay. Again, O has a disability in 1985 and he dies in 2008. In what year will the statute run? I'll give you another 20 seconds. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, stop it right here. Okay, so let's see what people put. Oh, this is pretty close. So about half of you put 2018, and about 40% of you put 2008. Someone put 2013. Not sure where that came from. Okay. All right. Allison, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear loud and clear. What did you put, Allison?
Okay, so can I get clarification, because on what year does statute run, what does that mean? Does that mean when it starts or when it ends?
The statute runs when it means when it ends.
Okay, then
We-
I think 2018.
Did other people think have the same question?
I put 2008 because I thought it was when it started. I didn't
Okay.
understand. That was my question.
Okay. Well, then let me ask. So it's a. Thank you. I'll clarify for next year. The phrase "when the statute runs" means when it finishes its cycle, right? Okay. So how about if I phrase it, "When will the 10-year statute conclude"? Is that more clear?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. You know what? You're right. I take the friendly amendment. My question perhaps wasn't as clear as it should be. In the law, when we say the statute runs, that's not when it begins, it's when it ends. Okay.
That makes
Well then, so then what your answer is,
2018.
okay, and
Or
why,
2000, yeah.
okay, that was the answer I'm looking for. And why 2018, just to clarify?
Because when he entered into the land of O, or when A entered, he was already mentally had a disability, and so
Yeah.
it only takes effect when he dies.
Okay, and I'll give credit for 2008 also, although 2018 is the correct answer, but I'll assume that people didn't understand my question. Okay. That's right. When when A entered, O was a minor. Okay? I'm sorry, when A entered, O had a disability, and we don't count that time. Okay, fair point. I'll give credit for both, but next question won't be so. I'll ask more forcefully. Okay, you don't start the clock because there's a disability. The clock never starts. The clock starts in 2008 when H inherits the land, because H has no disability, and you go to 2018. Okay, let's try this again. The question is a little bit changed. So now it's the second part. The same facts, same 10-year limitation period, but now we learn that O's heir H is 6 years in 2008. So I'm asking this question: what year will the 10-year statute conclude? Again, I'm not saying run. When does the 10 years run out? That's basically what I'm asking. Okay. Question's tweaked a little bit. I see people counting on their fingers. And Anthony, I see your hand. I'll get you in a second, okay? All right, 5 more seconds. All right, done. All right, let's see what we got. Ooh, okay. So about 60% of you put 2030. Okay, and about 30% of you put 2018. Okay, Anthony, you wanted to take this one, or do you have a question on something else?
My question was just real quick regarding the last question and the part in the statute where it says may bring such an action within 5 years after such disability is removed.
Yeah.
So I thought that meant, I put 2013 on the last one too, and I was completely wrong. But I thought what it meant was that since O died in 2008, you couldn't bring the action also until 5 years after disability.
Are you talking about the Texas statute?
Yeah, I know it's not like broad, but I thought.
I see what you're saying. Okay, you know what?
Do most of them not have that 5-year thing?
Yeah, that wasn't what I was looking for, but I'll give that credit. I see what you did there. This is why I don't give multiple choice questions on the exam, because always people fight me on them, and there's usually ways around them. But I see what you did there. It's fine. Let me get a question to this one. Genevieve, are you here? Oh, Cassidy. I'm sorry, Cassidy. Cass.
I did the math wrong.
Oh, okay.
I just can't do math. I'd like to change my answer, but I can't. I just want to let you know that I'd like to.
Oh well, you don't need to tell me that, but that's fine. These don't count for anything. I'm not grading them. These are simply for your own reaffirmation. But if I ask a question that I think is kind of ambiguous, I'll be happy to acknowledge that I'm there. Okay. Okay. All right. Now I do want to answer. Genevieve, you here?
I'm here.
All right, Genevieve, what'd you put to this question?
I put 2030.
Okay, I think I know why you did that, but tell me how you got to 2030.
So if he's 6 years old in 2008, it wouldn't start until he was 18.
Right.
Which is in 20. So 10 years from whenever it would start is what he has. So that's how I got to 2030.
So you think you can stack together two different disabilities?
Yes. That's what I came to.
All right. If you go to the class notes, I include on page 7 the Texas statute, which in this regard is pretty common. And if you go down to page 7, you'll see it says in section C, a person may not tack one legal disability to another to extend a limitation period. So the answer there is no, you can't do that. You can't stack a mental insanity plus a minor. You get one disability, right? You get one disability. So the answer to this question is also 2018. It's also 2018. And let me explain why. You only are allowed to toll the statute for one disability if O is of mental unsound mind. The second he dies, that disability goes away, and the clock goes tick, 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 tick. Right? You start the clock immediately. You do not stop the clock again. Now, someone always asks, "Well, Josh, what happens if a person is, a minor with a mental handicap?" You can generally pick the longer of the two. So let's just say O is a minor and O had a mental handicap. You would probably pick the mental handicap. And so long as O is alive with that handicap, the clock is stopped. Okay. Now, someone might ask, Josh, how long can that last for? Well, if the disability lasts for the person's entire life, it's his entire life. The clock never starts. If he has a miraculous recovery and comes out of the coma, well, then the clock starts. Exactly when you start the clock, you maybe can fight over it. What does it mean to have unsound mind? But in theory, at least, the disability can eliminate during the lifespan. Okay, Adam, I see your hands up.
Hi, I just had a quick question. So in regards to the disability, so I understand that, you can only use it once, but I guess my question is, what's the connection and how long does it last in regards to, the privity? Is it for forever with that particular property that you can only use that disability once, or is it just the privity of connection between, let's say the heirs and, whoever has?
Well, I think I see your question. Let me try to answer it more simply. When a person enters onto Blackacre, he's starting a 10-year clock. But there's a disability, you never start the clock. So there's no relationship that's ever formed. Just it's at that point of entry is your disability. And so long as that disability exists, you never start the clock. Okay. Ashley, you have a question?
Yes. Okay, so I was actually fixing to ask what he just did. And thank you. So it's not per property. It doesn't start over with a new owner. Since he died, the disability's gone, and since the 6 years old wasn't there when the person entered the property, it doesn't matter? The age.
Correct. All that matters is the disability that exists at the time of entry. I mean, that's why, I think the first question I asked today was about entry. Entry is a very important number, right? It matters what parts of the land you enter onto, 40 acres versus 60 acres, and it enters it at that moment in time were there any disabilities, right? This is why the concept of color of title is important. Let me repeat what color of title is. Someone asked that in their minute question. Color of title is some sort of documentation that establishes when you actually entered, right? It might be a forged deed, it might be an actual deed that had some errors in it, okay? But remember Mr. Robinson in Dallas, in Flower Mound, he had that paperwork he filed with the courthouse. Said, I, Mr. Robinson, entered on such and such date. That date is so important because it sets a lot of other things in motion, right? It asks, okay, what part of the land did you actually enter? Oh, I entered 40 acres. Okay. What date did you enter? I entered on January 1st. Oh, wait a minute, January 1st, Johnny had a disability, so that doesn't work. Or think of the Georgia O'Keeffe case, right? The most important issue is, when did the statute of limitations begin, right? For the paintings that were stolen. Did the statute begin in 1946? Or did the statute begin in 1975? The date that the statute begins is so critical because it defines the entire issue. And if you don't have the date of entry correct, you can't figure out disabilities. You can't figure out, which parts were actually utilized. So the dates are very important. Okay. And I see some of you are getting knocked out. I'm guessing maybe your Wi-Fi drops. Try calling in on the telephone also. I put the syllabus, the phone number of the syllabus. That way, even if you get knocked out, you don't miss class time. I know it sucks. I can't blame you for having bad wireless. None of us anticipated this world, but that there's one thing you can do to mitigate the risk. Okay. Questions? Okay, this is very good. If you see, we spent the first almost 50 minutes in questions. In my mind, I see class time as much better spent on doing these sorts of questions than, on Zoom at least, than doing the standard recitation. I know it's not ideal for everyone, but I'd much rather ask 5 or 6 questions. I'd much rather ask 5 or 6 questions than have to go lengthy recitation. Nancy just says, I don't know what you said, but my apologies, my internet dropped. Right, to mitigate it, you use your telephone. Right, on the syllabus, I put the phone number in. It's a local phone number. There's no long distance. Not that. Does anyone even pay long distance anymore? I don't even know. But it's a local Houston phone number. You call it. You enter in the PIN. The PIN is my class ID, which is my office phone number, right? So you enter the PIN, and you just listen. So you watch on the computer, and you listen on your phone, and you can do both at the same time. I encourage you to try it. I'll just put this in the chat because I know people don't have the syllabus at hand. Copy, paste, there. You can try that as well. Alrighty. Yes, Krista, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So on Tacking, there's privity of estate. Is there also privity of possession? So if a prior possessor had possessed it adversely with a new possessor, could there also be privity on that, or is it just on state?
Oh boy. Okay,
I'll ask about Texas because it doesn't address it.
You're asking a really good question, and my answer is don't worry about it. Okay. Privity is a very complicated concept. There's privity of estate, there's privity of contract, there's privity of possession, and they have different subtle meanings. At this point, don't worry about it. Later this semester, I think we might go a little bit more into different kinds of privity when we do covenants. We'll worry about it then. Don't worry about it now, because the concept of privity is not a neat concept. Make sense? Okay. All right. I want to remind everyone. Okay, so can I move on? Any other questions? We are here left with 25 minutes. We have the 2 cases, and which is about what I expected. Let me just address this point. Given that we have less time this semester and we have to spend more time on these assessments, which I actually think are quite helpful. I think the quizzes are more important than the recitation. I'm preparing these case summaries. So for example, I'll copy the links into the chat now. This is the link for Howard, and this is the link for O'Keeffe. And again, these are in the case summaries folder. I'm not going to keep pasting these for you, but I'll do it today for your benefit. These documents are designed to help you prepare for the classes. I just won't have as much time as I'd like to walk through them carefully. Now I know some professors are preparing videos. I'll be frank, I'm very skeptical of the value of me reading a document. I don't like listening to things, even though I do lots of video. I much rather read. So my preference is I'll give you something to read. If you want, you can have a screen reader to read out loud. But these are, in my mind, the highlights of the case, and these are the points that you should take away. So if after class things aren't clicking, read these, and you can come talk to me as well. But I think these are probably going to answer 90% of the questions. And again, I'll try to upload these either the night before or the morning of, depending when I fall asleep. But you'll get these before class starts to at least help you prepare. Usually, though, I'm up late. I'm usually up very late, so it'll be usually like 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll put them up right before I go to sleep. But you'll see them by the time you come to class. A couple of you do email me at 2 in the morning. I know there's some people up here late. Things are very quiet at night. No one bothers you. The world just sort of just slows down. I find my most productive hours. By the way, I have 2 young kids at home. I have a 20-month-old and a 1-month-old. So they are currently out with mom. But at some point, they'll probably come barging into the room. So you may see them. It's going to happen, but I'll try to keep it as separate as I can. All right. Let's start with the first case, Howard versus Kunto. And if you click, thank you. Yeah, it was a fun time having a baby during a corona. But you know, thank God everything was okay. So if you click on the link for Howard v. Kunto, please, you'll see a couple of diagrams for this case. Now, I think the diagrams in the book are, you know, pretty bad. I don't think they're very helpful. So I try to redesign them in a way that I think makes sense. And let me walk you through the facts. So the facts in this case are very, very, very messy. So you have 4 pieces of land. And I'm just going to name them because it makes things easier in my mind. This is not what they call it in the book, but in my mind it'll make things easier. Right, you have black acre, you have white acre, you have green acre, and you have red acre. Very original. Okay, black acre is unoccupied. White acre has Kunto's house on it. Green acre has Moyer's house on it. Red acre, as far as we can tell, is empty. I've looked into it. I don't know if there's anything in red acre, but it doesn't really matter for our question. This is land that's located in Washington along the Hood Canal. It's just sort of this very jagged, watery river area. Okay. Kunto thought he owned White Acre, where his house was. Moyer thought he owned Green Acre, where his house was. And Howard thought he owned Red Acre. Now, why am I saying he thought, right, with scare quotes? Well, it turns out everyone screwed up. Okay? Right, everyone's screwed up. If you scroll down to the next page, on page 2, I have a revised diagram. A survey was performed by Howard. And it turned out that everyone was on the lot 50 feet over from what they actually owned. So Kunto thought he owned a White Acre, but Kunto's deed was actually for Black Acre. Therefore, Kunto did not own the land where his house was. Moyer owned White Acre, but Moyer's house was on Green Acre. And who owned Green Acre? Howard. I don't know who owned Red Acre. Again, the facts aren't clear from the book. It doesn't really matter. So we have a problem, right? Green Acre is Moyer's house, is owned by Howard. Now, Howard strikes me as a bit of a jerk, right? He strikes me as a very shady person. And he proposes a very sneaky deal. I don't like this one bit. So Howard says, okay, here's the deal. Howard will give Moyers the deed to Green Acre. That's what Moyers wants, right? What does Moyers give in exchange? In exchange, Moyer gives Howard the deed to White Acre. So what's going on here? Howard would own the land that Kunto's house is on. Why would he do this? Right? Why would Howard do this? I think Howard's trying to steal Kunto's house. I think he was being a smartass. I was like, oh, I got this. You said, yeah, I want Kunto's house. I'm just going to take his property. Very shady, right? And in the end, I don't want to spoil the ending. He got nothing, right? In the end, Howard got 0. This is a general theme in property that I think you see a lot. The party who engages in bad faith negotiation usually gets screwed in the end. Not always, but that's like a general rule that if you are taking advantage of the courts, you're going to lose. Okay, that's the world we live in. So now if you go down to the next graphic, they swap. So Moyers owns the land on Greenacre with houses, no problem. Howard owns Whiteacre, where Kunto's house is. And then Howard goes to court and says, aha, we're going to quiet title and declare that I own Whiteacre and therefore I own Kunto's house. Kunto asserts adverse possession. Kunto asserts adverse possession. Okay, but Kunto has a few problems for adverse possession, right? The first two elements I think are satisfied easily enough. There was entry, he's on the land. Good. It's open and notorious, there's a house there, everyone sees it, that's easy. But the third element is tricky. The third element is tricky, continuous, right? It's disputed. So first up, we have this issue. Kunto was only on the property in the summer months. He was not there year-round. Okay. That doesn't matter. That's actually easy. The court holds that when you have a summer community, who has summer house? I don't have a summer house, right? In Houston, it's always summer, right? But when you have a summer home, you don't have to be there year-round. You're required to use the property as it would ordinarily be used. So as a property be used in its ordinary course, that's how you have to use it. So it doesn't matter that you're only there in the summer months. Okay, so far, so good for Kunto. So far, so good. But there's a far greater problem. He'd been there for a year. The guy moved in 1959. And there's a 10-year period in Washington State. So how can you possibly meet the 10-year limitation if he's been there for a year? Well, fortunately, we have the concept of tacking. Right? Miller sold a deed to Kunto. That puts the two of them in privity. And Miller had been there for some time. We don't know exactly how long. And before Miller was McCall. McCall gave a deed to Miller. They're in privity. So you have these three people. McCall, Miller, and Kunto. Each of them are in privity, and therefore you can tack, you can combine together their collective times. And if you combine their collective times, you reach 30 years. Well more than 10. So because of tacking, the court holds, you meet the continuous element. And Kunto can establish the third element, the continuous element of adverse possession. Okay? That part's easy, I think, actually. That's not a hard part of this case. The hardest part of this case is really the fourth element, the claim of right. Which, again, the claim of right means the state of mind. Last class we discussed there are different types of standards. Some states apply the aggressive trespasser standard, which is like Mr. Robinson, where you say, I am taking this land, it's not mine, I'm going to take it. And then you have a good faith standard. And with a good faith standard, you think, well, I was mistaken. I thought it was mine, but it wasn't mine. Right? It was a mistake. But this case is strange. It doesn't fit in any of these standards. Right? Why? Because he didn't even know which land he was on. Right? He thought he owned it, but he wasn't even on the land he owned. He had no intent to adversely possess Whiteacre because he thought he already owned it. It's a strange case. But the court here says it doesn't matter. Boundaries are very difficult to measure, and we can't expect people who live there to do a survey at every juncture. So even though he didn't even know he was on Whiteacre, he thought he was on Blackacre, right? He didn't even know he was trying to adversely possess it, it's enough. I'm not sure if this is right, this analysis. And if you read the notes afterward, the court actually overruled this aspect of the case, right? So I don't know, my sense is the fourth element probably wasn't correct. If you read it, it seemed kind of forced and didn't really explain I'll give you a general rule. When you read a court's opinion and the logic doesn't seem very clear, you don't really know what they're saying, it's probably wrong, right? If a judge can't spell out his logic step by step, they realize there's some sort of gap there. And I've never quite understood the fourth element analysis in this case. It just is incomplete in my mind. I think it was wrong. I don't think he had a claim of right, even under the good faith standard. He had no idea he was even squatting. He just had no clue. He was on the wrong piece of land. So in my mind, the average possession claim would be defeated. But here, imagine what would have happened if Kunto lost. Everyone on that block would have been wiped out. All these people have lost their properties. So I think the court basically said, yeah, we can't allow that to happen. We have to let adverse possession go forward. So it was basically, you have to think of the results. Okay, I mean, not the end of the world, but I think this fourth element is wrong. The continuous element, I think, is just fine. I think that was probably right on point. But I think the claim of right element was probably wrong. All right, so in the end, Kunto prevailed. Howard got zip, and Moyers was laughing because he got what he wanted. Okay. And what I'm reading, what I just discussed for you is more or less from the document I shared, so you can read that later if you want to supplement your notes. Questions on Kunto? Questions on Kunto? Nothing? Is it that clear? I thought that was a complicated case. Dylan, yes, raise his hand, go for it.
I just can't find the button. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think it's below, at the bottom of the participant, if you press participant button.
There it is.
You got it? Go for it.
So does that not meet the good faith standard? In good faith thought it was his.
Well, but what was his? He thought, right? He thought that the land was his, but you're right. He thought land was his, but in fact he had land that was completely over, right? Usually the way adverse possession works in these cases is like your staircase goes over the boundary by 15 inches, right? So you own part of it and you think you're acquiring additional parts. But here he thought he was acquiring something completely different from what he actually owned. So it's not the usual case of mistaken fact. It's something completely different. Does that make sense? Right? In other words, let's just say you bought Blackacre, right? And you thought the boundary was here, but it was actually over here. So you're living on Blackacre all these years, and then it turns out that those 15 inches weren't yours. Well, it's a good faith mistake, right? Because you thought the boundary was here, but it was actually there. But here, he was completely off of his own land, so it doesn't fit the normal circumstance. Okay, Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi, my only question was, I understand the privity, all of that, but what I guess I'm kind of confused with is it that you have to have you don't have to have a chain of title to make people in privity under tacking, but do they have to know of each other, if that makes sense, order for them to be in privity, unbeknownst to them, they each for 5 years at a time had adversely possessed this land. Could they put that together for tacking?
They need some sort of agreement, either in writing or be oral, right?
Pardon? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, and there's a bad echo, so I'm going to just put you on mute for a second, Caitlin. In order for privity to work, there has to be some sort of arrangement. It can be in writing or it can be oral, but that's some sort of arrangement between the two of them. It can't just be, I'm here 5 years, then you're here the next. There has to be some sort of personal interaction. It can be in writing, it can be in oral. Does that make sense? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on mute, but there was a really bad echo, and I think it was, okay. We're living in the Zoom world. Okay. Any other questions on Kunto? The hardest part of that case is figuring out the damn facts. The first year I taught this, I struggled because just the chronology. And so I think this black acre, white acre, green acre, red acre is a lot easier than the diagram in the book. The diagram in the book is just awful. I don't like it. All right. I send emails to the editor of the book just about every class complaining about stuff, and they do change things. So I do. No, they're receptive because I read things very carefully, perhaps too carefully. I found an error in the next case also. In the O'Keefe case, the trial court grants summary judgment, so there was never a trial. And at the end of the case, they say there was a retrial. No, that's not correct. There was never a first trial. There can't be a retrial. So there was an error. Anyway, not terribly important, but yeah, it for matters. Okay. All right. I know more about CIPRA than their contracts. I'll give you that much. Okay. All right. Any other questions on Kunto? My remaining delightful 8 minutes of class in this lovely shortened world. God. I'm going to. I'll discuss O'Keefe. By the way, that's why I'm giving these summaries. So if what I'm saying is not enough, you can go back and supplement. Again, I'm doing the best I can to make sure you understand. I would rather put time on questions than put time on recitation for cases, because this is something that can be done on your own. Okay, so we have this a painter, George O'Keefe. I don't get art. Just it's not my thing, but I know people do, and they spend a lot of money on it. Okay. And apparently there's this entire world of stolen art. Professor Fincham, who is one of my colleagues, is an expert on stolen art. If you ever want to know about art and theft, just go talk to Professor Fincham. He's an expert on this. I don't know anything about it. In 1946, some paintings went missing from her gallery in New York. She did nothing for 3 decades. And finally, in the 70s, she reported it stolen. Okay. And then in 75, she learned that these paintings were on display. It turns out that Snyder had put them on display. Snyder got it from Frank. And where did Frank get it from? Frank got it from his father. So if you tack together Snyder, Frank, and Frank's father, they had it for nearly 30-something years. The exact length is unclear, but about 30 years. O'Keefe sues Snyder for what's called replevin, R-E-P-L-E-V-I-N, replevin. You might have had a case in contracts where it said replevin for a cow. Yeah, it burned in my memory from the first year. Replevin is where you try to recover stolen property or wrongfully obtained property. Right? It's a cause of action. Snyder says, wait a minute, who the hell are you, right? You haven't had this painting for 30 years, right? I didn't steal it. Maybe Frank's father stole it, we don't know, right? But I didn't steal it. I've acquired this through adverse possession. So whatever title you had has been extinguished. All right, now, this is not adverse possession for real property, that's land. It's adverse possession for a chattel. A chattel is a thing, right? You call a chattel personal property. You have real property, which is land, and personal property, which is stuff, right? You know, a painting, for example. The same elements for adverse possession usually apply for chattels. I say usually, but we're in New Jersey. Everything's legal in New Jersey, right? It's a line from Hamilton. New Jersey Supreme Court is notorious for overruling common law rules. I think I told you this last year, right? If you have a case from New Jersey, they're going to overrule the common law without fail. I don't even care what the facts are. If there's a New Jersey case in your book, they're going to make some stuff up. Sorry, they're going to evolve the law. I said that out loud. Okay. Sometimes my common law bleeds into property. I'm sorry. But they make a new rule in New Jersey. It's very common. You'll see this in all of your case books. So traditionally, the 6-year limitation period would have run in the 1950s, right? 1952 or something, right? A long time ago. But the New Jersey court decided to shake things up. How? Well, they adopted what's called the discovery rule. The discovery rule. What's a discovery rule? Well, usually the statute of limitations will start ticking when there's entry, or we say when the cause of action accrues. That's just a fancy way of saying when were the paintings stolen, right? So usually you would start the clock when the paintings were stolen, and you have 6 years to recover them. And if you fail to recover the paintings within 6 years, then someone can make a claim for adverse possession. But New Jersey said that's too harsh. That's too mean. We can't do the discovery rule. We're New Jersey. We can't do that. So we have this discovery rule. So now, when does the statute of limitations start? When O'Keefe first knew or reasonably should have known the exercise of due diligence of the cause of action, including the identity of the possessor of the paintings. Again, the cause of action, the statute begins when O'Keefe first knew or reasonably should have known through the exercise of due diligence of the cause of action, that's the stolen paintings, including the identity of the possessor of the paintings. Now, what does that actually mean? The court doesn't tell us. Does it mean 1946? Does it mean some point after 46? Does it mean 1976? Right? When does this actually accrue? The court doesn't tell us. But at least O'Keefe can show that 1946 is not the correct starting point. Maybe she only would have known about it later. Now, I don't think that's the case here. I think she should have known right away that these things were stolen in 46. So all this is basically for nothing, I think. I mean, I think she loses under either standard, but at least you can see there's some cases where a person may not know the paintings were stolen, right? You know, maybe the paintings were in a vault somewhere and they just weren't paying attention. So there, they would start the clock when they learn about it. So the first, the court applies its discovery rule. Second, the court shifts the burden of proof. Right, usually the person who's asserting adverse possession has to prove that the 6-year period had run. For example, Snyder says, oh, I've had it for 30-something years, a 6-year period run. It's his burden to show. But the court flips the burden. The burden is now on O'Keefe. O'Keefe must show that the 6-year period has not run. O'Keefe has to show that she didn't know, or she didn't know about it in 1946. She should not have. She didn't need to know about it until 1976. So the important point here is that the burden now belongs to O'Keefe to show that the 6-year clock had not run. The last point is fairly straightforward. It's tacking is permissible, right? Because Snyder, Frank, and Frank's father were in privity, you can add together their time. Okay. Right up to the end. I'm going to start in the background, the short answer, the minute question. So if you can just type in your biggest takeaway from the class, what you learned, or maybe a question, I'll review these after class. If anyone has a question for now, you can raise your hand. I'd be happy to talk to you. If you need to leave at 10:15, that's fine. But I'll answer questions for a bit. Yes, Dana, go ahead. What kind of wine goes with the squats? Oh, God.
Wait, oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, I was just wondering for the burden of proof, is it always on the person who's claiming adverse possession?
Usually.
Since New Jersey, it's different.
Well, it's not just New Jersey. It's New Jersey, and they made a special rule for personal property. Like, did you ever watch the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Right? You can't steal property, right? You can't steal the Eiffel Tower unless you're on TV, right? You can't steal real property, but you can steal a painting. So I think what the court's saying is a special rule should apply for real property. I'm sorry, a special rule should apply for personal property because it's so easy to steal. All right, so that's what the court did here. Okay, yes, Jenny, I think you're up. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
For purposes of our notes, the discovery rule, the burden of proof shift, and packing from O'Keefe are all modern jurisdiction. It's not, has nothing to do with common law, correct?
Absolutely correct.
All 3 points, though. Okay.
Well, the tacking, I'm sorry, the tacking is actually fairly conventional. I don't think that part of the opinion was wrong. I think that was the easiest part of the case. But the first two, the shifting the burden of proof and the discovery rule, that's all novel in New Jersey. And if you didn't get the reference, there's a line in Hamilton where Burr and Hamilton go to duel, and they can't duel in New York because dueling is illegal in New York, so they all sing, everything's legal in New Jersey, and that's one of the lines in the song. Okay. I know some of you are having difficulty typing on your iClicker on your app. Try to use the browser version. The phone version is not very good. Okay, I'll let this open for a few more minutes. That's all I have. Class is dismissed, and I will see you all on Monday. Thank you.